The town of Scituate's 2022 May elections are Saturday, May 21st, from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. on that high school gym. And if you voted in May of 2021, you may think this May 2022 ballot looks kind of familiar. Why? Because once again, only one race is contested, and once again, that falls underneath the school committee. But what's different this time around is that there are two positions up for grabs. In position 1, it's Carrie Borkowski and Michelle Kraemer. In position 2, Nicole Brandolini and Richard Taft. This is Michelle Kramer's first run for that school committee, and she says she wants to raise the bar for students academically and personally. She also says there are clear opportunities to improve academics and resources. Right now, it's your time to meet Michelle Kraemer. Michelle Kraemer, thank you for being here. Fresh off a little vacay in Jamaica. Welcome back. Now it's time to get down to business, right?
That's right.
That's right. Before we get to any questions, I just want to say this, is that, look, I monitor social media quite a bit, and I see individuals go on and complain and berate elected officials. And the thing that frustrates me every single time is that I'm like, you're not making a difference. The way to make a difference is to get involved. You're doing that right now by joining this race. Thank you. No, really mean that. That's great. That's great. All right, enough chit chat. Let's get down to it. First, I want to give you that opportunity. Introduce yourself and explain why you're running for school committee.
Awesome. So my name is Michelle Kraemer. I actually want to spend a little time talking about who I am as a person and where I grew up. So I actually grew up in Marshfield, graduated from Marshfield High in 2001, but actually spent a lot of my time in Scituate. Spent my summers in Hummerock like my father did on the South River on our boats with many friends who actually attended Scituate High and who I actually have a high school sweetheart from Scituate. So, love the town. You know, and when my husband and I were looking for communities to live in, Scituate was always on the top of my list. One, because I had a lot of community ties here, but really the quaintness of the town, the beaches, the strong sense of community here, and also the schools. So those were really the driving factors that had us really looking at Scituate for a town. And when we moved, we have loved it ever since. It's really been an awesome community. We've had great ties developed, and we continue to do so with our kids participating in many activities here. Professionally, I like to describe myself as a lifelong learner. I recently got my doctorate in nursing practice in the summer of 2021, and specifically in the executive leadership track, which really focuses on quality improvement and education within the nursing practice. So something I truly love is learning, thinking about my next steps in my learning path. And so, but also in addition to obtaining this degree, I've been practicing as a pediatric neurology nurse practitioner for the past 12 years, specifically with working with children and caring for children with behavioral neurology conditions. And what exactly does that mean? I've really been working with kids who have learning disabilities, developmental delays, cognitive impairment, physical impairments, attention deficit disorders, as well as mental health conditions that may impact their ability to sleep or may have somatic symptoms such as like a migraine, headache, or things. So really have been working with kids and also with schools, because many times children with neurologic impairment need special attention at school, individualized IEPs or education plans, as well as 504 plans. So, you know, this has been my passion, both for me professionally, but also me as a learner. And I really think that following the pandemic, a really unprecedented time for our community, both in medicine, but also here within Scituate, it really opened my eyes to many opportunities that we have within medicine, but also at the Scituate, you know, community level, especially our schools. Unfortunately, we have unintended consequences that have fallen out since, you know, COVID hit. And I think with my expertise working with these children, I really do have a unique perspective that I can add to the school committee. so that's really the driving force, and really wanting to bring unity to our community through clear communication, transparency, and just really working with our community teachers as well as students, as well as parents. So, lots of different reasons, but really just to better unify and bring our schools to the next step.
That's great. I did not put this question on your list. If you cannot answer it, feel free. But with your background, I want to ask you, I don't want to talk about pandemic and COVID-19, but with your background, I do want to ask you this. With the school system here, there was little to no guidance from the state. All these districts really had to figure it out themselves. How do you think Scituate Public Schools handled it?
I'll be completely honest with you. During the pandemic, my attention was elsewhere. So I was clinically leading a COVID-19 clinic. I was also a nurse director at the time, managing staff where 60% of our staff was deployed. So to be completely transparent and honest, I think they did good, but I really didn't experience it because I was elsewhere trying to continue to move our community forward in a different way. So I really can't.
That's fine.
I cannot comment. In all honesty,
that's the only curveball. I swear. I promise. I promise.
It's fair. I'll be honest. I think everyone did the best they could with the information we had, and that's all I can say. I think there are many lessons learned, and I hope that we can continue to learn from those lessons. But I honestly can't comment because I was in the hospitals. Yeah,
unprecedented time, indeed, indeed. All right, listen, you made a splash very early on in this campaign trail when you posted on social media regarding the status of Scituate Public Schools. I don't have that post in front of me, but really the point was that after that, then other people weighed in. And they're like, wait, what about this information or this information? What it all comes down to is academic excellence. So before I even ask you how SBS is doing, I want to know this. When you formulate how you think Scituate Public Schools is doing, where do you go to get your information?
So I think that's a valid question, and one that I think you really need to look at many different aspects of data, right? So you can't look at one data point in one specific time and get a sense of how a school or district is doing. You really need to look at trends over time, and you also need to look at different types of data, right? So you have your Department of Education prints out all information about your MCAS scores, advanced placement testing, as well as demographic information. So you have your DOE, which is a good source of truth. You also have different rankings, such as U.S. News World Report, which was the one I had cited, showing that there was that decline. I think with any sort of way you're looking at data, you need to also understand how their methods of how they're ranking. So U.S. News World Report in general has changed their methodology of how they calculate rankings over time. And the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to find a way in which the best way to rank schools. So you can't look at one year in particular and get a good sense, but you can get a sense overall. And then last is really looking at more qualitative data, is more of your surveys from your teachers in your schools and your staff, your parents, the community in general. And a good example of something that the superintendent did recently was the Thought Exchange, where it was open to the SPS community to really give qualitative information about what are we doing well, what could we be doing better, and what would you change. So I think you need to look at it all. But I think what you need to, before you even can look at data and decide how you're doing and assessing how a district is doing, you need to define what academic excellence actually is. And I think my definition would be different from the person next to me and what have you. So I think, the superintendent is trying to figure out how, as a district and a community, do we want to define academic excellence. What I can tell you is my definition, my personal definition, is a holistic definition. So it's not only looking at academic performance data and seeing how we're performing, ensuring that we're continuing to improve so our kids have a competitive edge if they're college bound, but we also need to look at other opportunities. Not every child or student wants to go to college, and they don't have to. And they don't have to go to college to be successful, and I truly do believe that. But we do, however, we should as a community provide our students opportunities to explore other things like trades. And how do we do that without losing them to vocational schools and things? Is there opportunity there? And so I think looking at academics more holistically is important, but also through the well-being of the student. You know, how are they emotionally? Are they well supported? So just ensuring academic excellence to me means ensuring all of our kids have the resources and supports they need to be successful.
So now that you have your information, how do you think SPS is doing when it comes to academic excellence?
Yeah.
Very broad question, I'm aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's it, but it's a good question. I think we have a lot of strengths. You know, I think we have great teachers. We have great faculty here. We have great courses that are being available. There are great clubs. There's great athletics. There are some areas of opportunity, but there always will be areas of opportunity. And so I think just thinking about where we can optimize, you know, standardizing core curriculum across elementary schools comes to my mind. You know, how can we ensure that children, no matter what elementary school they go to, based on where they live, they receive the same core curriculum through the same sort of, you know, standardized program? And I think one area that is currently being worked on is, you know, is there a core reading program that all elementary schools can use? And I think that is important to not only do for reading, but also for STEM-related courses, so math and science. Really the next step would be, how do we continue to ensure that all students, when they reach middle school, that they're at the same level? Because we want to make sure that when kids get there, the teachers know what to expect and they're not dealing with a bunch of kids that have learned things in a different way. So really making it easier for our teachers as well as our students, and making sure there's equity across. So that's one example of opportunity. I think another area would be providing you know, a world language program starting in elementary school. So I think we do have some really great opportunities that we should be continuing to explore.
You mentioned teachers a little bit. I want to talk about teachers and really curriculum. Now, obviously, the school committee doesn't dictate curriculum, but I would say they certainly have some influence. And I bring this up because I was talking to a teacher who was kind of discussing his curriculum, and it was exact structure as to what he should be teaching almost every day. And I've said this before, it's almost like paint by the numbers. So, and while curriculums are important, when does it start to hinder a teacher's ability with this craft that they've learned and focus on individualized learning? Yeah,
I think it's a hard balance. And I think, you know, I've had some conversations with some teachers, and I think teachers, you know, from my conversations, who have been teaching for a longer period of time are feeling those constraints even more. And I think a lot of this is dictated by DESE. You know, so I think there's only so much flexibility we have based on the requirements DESE provides us. However, for instance, you know, I was talking to a teacher actually this morning about math curriculum in particular, and how we're trying to, you know, from DESE requirements, have kids learn concepts in math that they're not cognitively ready for yet. And so I think, you know, that is hindering teachers' ability to be creative. And I think for me, I would love to be able to have teachers be creative in the way that they're teaching curriculum, but I do think some of the standards are hindering that. But I do think one way we can help teachers is by providing them meaningful professional development. How can we, you know, as lifelong learners, and I think teachers are right there with nursing, is that we constantly want to learn better strategies, new and improved ways of teaching, and keeping our craft up to date. So I want to make sure that that is also something that we look at, as I've heard from teachers that is an area that we can certainly improve. Along with academic excellence comes personal excellence, and making sure that every student feels equal and included, which leads us to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that Scituate Public Schools was really at the forefront of this initiative in the hiring, like, of Jameel Adams, the DEI director in the school system, and became a model for other districts. However, this initiative wasn't exactly welcomed by all, and a lot of people feel like students go to school to learn math, science, language, and that there isn't really a place for DEI. DEI should not be in the school. And I want to say, it's not that they're against diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're just saying in the school it shouldn't. What do you think? You know, I think, again, this is something that we have to listen to all parents about. I think everyone has an opinion on this, and I do think it's somewhat sensitive, and it's fair conversation. However, I really do feel that teaching inclusivity to all children is extremely important, not only to their development, but also their emotional well-being. So I do feel that there is place to teach kids to be kind to one another. And I also think as far as, you know, what is appropriate and not appropriate, because I do think that does play a factor in some of this, is, you know, going back to what I said about the math curriculum, we just need to make sure that things are developmentally and cognitively appropriate for the kids that we're teaching them.
Got it. When it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity, should that be taught in Scituate Public Schools, and if so, what grade?
So this is another question that is highly personal and really needs to be approached with care. Through my professional experience, I have worked with many children who have been dealing with highly sensitive topics with their parents. And what I've learned as a pediatric nurse practitioner is each situation is individual. Not every approach is going to be the same. And so I think looking at things through that lens is super important, because each situation will be different. And so for me, I really would defer to medical experts who have expertise in this area to determine what is and what isn't appropriate at certain ages, but also really take into account what parents feel and think, and really developing an environment that's caring, where people are feel open and that they're being listened to. I think that's really important, and having clear lines of communication and transparency is super important. You know, DESE is going to dictate a lot of the curriculum that needs to occur. However, I really feel that it's important to ensure that curriculum is transparent for parents in particular, and that's the environment I want to create.
Got it. Let's shift to systemic racism. So for individuals that are not familiar with systemic racism, it's this idea that there are elements in the American system that create disadvantages for minorities, Black Americans. Now this really started in our justice system, but of course has since spread into all the businesses and industries, which includes the Scituate School Committee. So in October of 2020, the Scituate School Committee released their anti-racism statement with this controversial line that said, quote, "We commit to proactively uprooting the systemic racism that currently exists in Scituate Public Schools." Michelle, do you think systemic racism exists in Scituate Public Schools?
I personally do not believe systemic racism lives within our SPS community. However, I do think that there are opportunities or teaching moments for our kids. I think things do come up. You know, kids go through developmental stages, and one of the biggest ones is social, you know, finding your social place and learning who you are, where your place is in the world. And through that, you will experiment with different things. And I do think that in those moments, those are the moments that we need to teach our kids empathy, how to take another person's perspective. And so I do think that those situations will continue to arise because that's part of the development of a child. However, using those as teaching moments, I think, are super important.
Great. Let's. I want to ask about gender equality. I did not put this on your list, please. I'm not throwing you curveballs left and right. This is good. So last year, the Town of Scituate Select Board changed its name from Selectmen to Select Board. Shortly after that, in the high school, some students tried to start a movement to have the word freshman changed. What do you think about that? And I say that it didn't take off because no one could come up with another term. Just
yeah, I was going to say, what would your term be?
Fresh person. That was the front runner.
That's really hard. You know, to me, it personally, I guess where's the line? To be totally honest, and that's me personally. Although I would want to hear what other people have to say. I'd want to hear their thoughts and what, you know, just hear both sides. I never thought of that, to be totally honest, and you're throwing me a curveball, which is totally fine. But I guess for me, as a school committee member, I would want to listen to both sides. I'd want to hear what both sides have to say and then make a decision from there.
Got it. Great. Let's shift completely. Go to budget. So obviously, I'm going to assume you probably looked at the budget, the previous one. So as you know, it's like Gone with the Wind. I mean, it's huge. So How do you approach it? You go front to back? Do you zero in on certain areas? Walk me through your process.
I think you have to go through every single detail, honestly. The budget, 2/3 of taxpayer money goes to our budget. It's a significant part of what we're spending as taxpayers, and I think it's super important to make sure you have a good understanding of where your money is going and what it's being used for. So I go through things in a very detail-oriented way. It's just who I am. I'm very detail-oriented. One thing I noticed is more related to the McKinney-Vento program. Have you heard of that before?
I'm not familiar with that.
So that is a program that was developed at the federal level to help assist children who become homeless. And homelessness, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are living on the streets. There's a larger definition of homelessness, and it could be that you are doubling up, meaning, say I can't afford my mortgage and I move in with my mother, with my kids. That would be a definition of doubling up. Or say you are living in a residence that's not considered long-term, so a hotel or something like that, a car, a campground, things of that nature. And so I was surprised to see that budget, or not really have a budget for it, or a program developed for kids who become homeless, especially in light where we had 4 kids drop out last year who are socioeconomically disadvantaged kids. And 4, I think, is 4 too many. I think 1 is too many to be dropping out. And we had a child or a student drop out as young as being in the 10th grade. And so for me, that was a line item that I would like to explore more, because I think as a community we need to ensure that all of our kids have the opportunity, 1, to graduate high school, but 2, to be successful. And not graduating high school is a significant impact on your life. And so that is something I would love to do a deeper dive into, and how as a community do we come together to really support kids in need.
I want to focus a little bit on facilities within that budget. I think 3.74% for the facilities, and I bring this up because big discussions now is that the school administration is pushing to combine Hatherley and Cushing into one elementary school. Do you agree with that? The original statement of interest, the SOI, was submitted in 2019, and I realized that there was a school building committee developed, school committees involved with these discussions. I'll have to be completely honest, I need to do more research in this in particular. It's not I can't find a lot of information online, so I really would need to look into it. I know there's a lot of conversation of how would that change the structure of our elementary schools. Would we be going from a neighborhood elementary school kind of setup or structure to a grade structure? And I think I would really want to listen to the public and hear what they have to say about that, but also listen to the feasibility reports and such before making any sort of determination on that. It is, well, I would tell you this. So when the Superintendent Burkhead and the Finance Director, Dr. Dush, went in front of the Select Board, Select Board member Andrew Goodrich was extremely critical of this. And he just said, if you look at the buildings of Cushing and Hatherley, you have not taken care of them at all. Right. Why would we approve building a new one?
That's a really good point.
Do you think, do you think that these buildings could have been saved if they had been maintained better?
So that was a big point that the superintendent had actually brought up as they started creating a maintenance line budget item for maintaining the buildings. I, of course, think that you could always maintain a building. However, I think codes do change and things do change that may impact that. But again, I need to do more research on that.
Fair enough. Let's talk communication and transparency. Everyone loves the word transparency nowadays. How do you think SBS, the administration, is doing communicating with parents, teachers, staff?
I think they've made some great strides in their communication. We have the weekly newsletters that come out. We had the superintendent Seaside Chats where the community was invited to have conversation with the superintendent. We had the exchange, the thought exchange, which I thought was very helpful. So I think there is an attempt there. I think there's always going to be room for or opportunities to continue to move that needle and improve it. And And so one area that comes to mind is really true transparency of curriculum, as well as professional development for teachers. I think it's really important. I think there is this underlying sense of distrust, and I think one way we can definitely help that is by continuing to be transparent with curriculum, as well as professional development, and also really just setting up some clear lines of communication. So one thing I thought of myself was setting up some office hours where it's just an open door invitation during a set of time, you know, where people can come in and really just talk about any sort of concerns or even positive things, you know, things that are going well. I think that's super important because then we can continue to build off things that are going well. So really just setting up clear lines of communication and allowing people to feel that there's a safe space for them to have those discussions.
You and I were talking about Facebook earlier and the communication that goes on there, and there's a ton of it, and it is a way that individuals communicate. The Scituate Public School System has opted not to have a Facebook page. Good choice or bad choice?
I think it's a good choice, personally. Through my experience, have worked with kids who are bullied, both like physically, but also bullied like in person, and bullied what's called cyberbullying.
Yeah.
But I do think that having that be at minimal is important, to be completely honest. I think Facebook has or social media in general, has opens up doors of really some negativity. So I agree with that decision, to be totally honest.
As adults, sometimes we can get distracted with issues, political issues or things, but at the end of the day with that school committee, it's all about the students.
All about the kids.
So we can't do this interview without some student voices. I'm going to give you 2 questions. We're going to start in the elementary school.
Oh, this is so cute.
Hi, my name is Logan Nyberg, and I'm a 4th grader at Jenkins Elementary School. I have a question for you. Who was your favorite teacher when you were in elementary school?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So my favorite teacher was Mrs. Deegan. She was my 2nd grade teacher, and she was just the most kind person. I had a lot of trouble early on reading, and she was super important to me. So
That's great.
Yeah, she was my favorite teacher.
Good. Let's jump to high school.
Okay.
My name's Braden. I'm a junior at Scituate High School. My question for the candidate is, what was your best and what was your worst subject in high school?
Oh, it's another good one. So my favorite subject was science, which is probably why I ventured to be a science major in college. And my worst was probably gym. I did not like gym. I am not inclined.
Oh, good. That's great. That's great. Well done. Well, hey, listen, thank you for being here. Before you go, one more time, tell voters why they should vote for you on May 21st.
So again, I'm Michelle Kraemer, and I really am here to represent the community, parents and students. And my #1 goal is to keep it about the kids. And it's really giving them quality education, ensuring that they are well cared for, provided resources, supports, as well as a unified community is super important to me. And I, again, am all about the kids. So thank you.
Michelle Kraemer, thank you for being here. And remember that election, May 21st, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in that high school gym.